The envelope had no return address, plain white unremarkable except for the careful penmanship spelling out my name. I turned it over in my hands, fingertips catching on the precise hospital corners of it seams. The postmark read, Rich Richmond, Virginia City. I hadn't called home in 11 years. My breath caught. Only one person would send a letter like this. The kitchen clock ticked behind me, each second stretching into the next. As I slid my finger under the flap, the paper inside was heavy, formal black border embossed letters. In memoriam, Walter James Moore, 1950 224. The room tilted. I gripped the counter, the granite cold against my palm. Mom. I looked up to find Micah in the doorway, his lanky frame casting a long shadow across our tiny kitchen. At 11, he was already showing hints of the man he would become. Thoughtful eyes, quiet strength in the set of his shoulders, the same shoulders that had once fit in the crook of my arm, the night I carried him through the rain. Are you going to go? He asked. The question hung between us, heavy with all the stories I'd never told him about his grandfather. About the night Walter Moore looked at his bruised daughter holding a newborn and chose his pride over mercy. I don't know, baby. The words came out rough. I cleared my throat. It's complicated. Mike across the kitchen, his sock feet silent on the linoleum. He was wearing the Superman pajamas I'd found on clearance last month, already too short at the ankles. What happened when I was a baby? My hand found his hair darker than mine, but with the same stubborn wave. You remember me telling you about that? Some. He leaned against the counter. You said we needed a fresh start. That's why we came to Knoxville. Fresh start. Such a gentle way to describe that night. The porch light casting shadows across Walter's face as he stood in the doorway of my childhood home. The rain soaking through my shirt as I begged him to just listen. Brick watching from the window silent. Travis's car in the driveway engine running, but he never stepped out to help. You made your bed. Now lie in it. The words had followed me all the way to the women's shelter, echoing with each mile marker between Richmond and Knoxville. What they did was wrong. Micah's voice pulled me back. Sometimes his perception startled me how much he understood without being told. I folded the invitation carefully, squaring the corners. Yes, it was. But I'd built something from that wrong. A life, a career at the East Knoxville Library. This small apartment with its secondhand furniture and walls covered in Micah's artwork. Every month I'd sent money through Mr. Norman to help with Walter's utilities. Not enough for him to track me down, but enough to say I was still his daughter, even if he didn't want to be my father. I'd even driven back once when I heard about his stroke. Stood in the hospital corridor until Brooke spotted me and had security escort me out. After that, I'd mailed one of Micah's drawings, a bright crayon scene of a boy and his mother in a garden. No return address, just to let Walter know his grandson had inherited his mother's love of art. Now Walter was gone, and with him any chance of hearing the words I'd spent 11 years telling myself I didn't need to hear. The sun was setting outside our kitchen window, painting the walls the same rusted orange as that night in Richmond. Micah touched my arm, his fingers warm through my sleeve. I've never met my grandfather, he said quietly. I looked at my son, this beautiful boy, who had never known his father's anger or his grandfather's rejection, who drew pictures of gardens he'd never seen and still believed. Family meant something more than blood and duty. Some things need to be said, I whispered, even if they're late. The invitation felt lighter now, as if naming the herd had somehow eased its weight. Maybe that's what Walter had understood at the end. Maybe that's why he'd made sure I'd know when he was gone. I pulled Micah close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and the laundry detergent I bought in bulk when it went on sale. Tomorrow we would pack. Tomorrow we would drive across state lines to say goodbye to a man who had said goodbye to us years ago. But tonight, I held my son in our kitchen as the sunset painted everything gold. And I let myself remember the father I'd had before he became the man who closed his door. St. Matthew's Methodist Church hadn't changed in 35 years. The same red brick exterior, the same white columns where I'd posed for my baptism photos. Even the crack stepped third from the bottom remained waiting to trip unwary visitors. Micah's hand tightened in mine as we approached. Mom, just stay close, baby. Through the stained glass windows, I caught glimpses of movement. Dark shapes arranging flowers, straightening programs preparing to say goodbye to Walter Moore, my father. Brooke stood on the top step in a black designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her perfect posture weapon. Travis loomed beside her in an equally expensive suit, his shoulders squared like a bouncer at an exclusive club. They positioned themselves as gatekeepers, but they couldn't stop me now. Not anymore. The whispers started before we reached the steps. Is that Lindsay? After all these years, the nerve of her showing up now. Mrs. Henderson, my old Sunday school teacher, physically turned her back as we passed. Mr. Phillips studied his shoes with sudden fascination. But Cousin Rachel's sharp intake of breath cut deep as she'd been my bridesmaid. Once upon a time, we slipped into the last pew just as the organist began the prelude. The wood felt cool and smooth beneath my fingers, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. How many Sundays had I sat here between my parents studying the back of Mrs. Miller's elaborate hats while my mother whispered silly observations that made me bite my lip to keep from giggling? Programs, the usher murmured, extending a stack without meeting my eyes. The paper was heavy, expensive. A black and white photo of my father smiled up at Mono, the recent Walter with his stroke face. But the Walter of 15 years ago, strong and stern. Below his dates, the text honored his loving children, Brooke and Travis Moore. My fingers crumpled the edge before I could stop myself. Look, Micah whispered, pointing to the photo display in the narthex. Decades of family history arranged on foam board holidays, graduations, weddings. But something was wrong with the images. In the Christmas photo from 1992, an awkward gap existed between my siblings where I should have been. My graduation photo was conspicuously absent. Even the ancient family portrait had been cropped, transforming 4 smiling faces into 3. The organ swelled into Amazing Grace, my mother's favorite hymn, the one she sang while gardening, while cooking, while rocking me after nightmares. I closed my eyes against the sudden burn of tears. A gentle pressure on my shoulder made me start. Aunt Margaret stood in the aisle, her aged hand warm through my jacket. She didn't speak, but her finger squeezed once before she moved to her seat. Behind her, Mr. Norman caught my eye and nodded his weathered face kind. The service passed in a blur of eulogies about family legacy and fatherly devotion. Brookie spoke about Walter's dedication to his children, both of them. Travis celebrated the Moore family strength. Not once did either of them glance toward our pew. But when Mrs. Pearson, the church organist, passed by during communion, she pressed a folded note into my palm. The paper shook as I opened it. Your father spoke of you. 4 words. But they cracked something in my chest that I'd kept carefully sealed for 11 years. The final hymn ended. People began to stir, gathering purses and shuffling toward the exits. I stood reaching for Micah's hand, but Travis materialized in the aisle. His bulk blocked our path. Came for the money, huh? Micah pressed against my side. I lifted my chin. I came to say goodbye to my father. Your father. Travis barked a laugh. You gave up that right when you walked away. No, my voice stayed quiet but carried. I gave up safety to protect my son. There's a difference. Brooke's voice rang from the front of the church. Immediate family only for the graveside service. The crowd parted. Everyone watched, waited. The air felt thick with anticipation. I'm still his daughter. I said each word clear and distinct. Whether you acknowledge it or not. Micah's spine straightened beside me. My brave boy, witnessing his mother's quiet resistance. I taught him we didn't need to shout to be strong. As we turned toward the exit, Mr. Norman touched my elbow. His whisper barely stirred the air. He left something for you. Be at the house at 3. Sunlight spilled through the stained glass, painting the floor in jewel tones, the same light that had danced across my white dress at my baptism. My first communion, my wedding, now it blessed my steps as I walked out of St. Matthew's, with my head high, my son's hand warm, and my knowing that somewhere in that church, my father had spoken my name. Not even Brooke and Travis could erase that truth. Instead of the service, I went to the hotel with my son. Tomorrow we will gather at the house that used to be my home 11 years ago. The morning sun cast long shadows across the brick walkway as we approached my childhood home. Micah's hand tightened in mine, his footsteps slowing. The white columns of the front porch loomed before us unchanged since the night I'd stood there in the rain. "Mom," Michael whispered, "those people don't look happy to see us." A wall of black-clad figures blocked the entrance. Brooke stood front and center, her pearl necklace catching the light. Travis flanked her right side while Aunt Patricia and Uncle James filled in the gaps. Behind them, cousins and family friends peered through the windows, their faces pressed against the glass like children at a carnival show. "The reading is for legitimate heirs only." Brooke's voice carried across the lawn sharp as winter wind. "You gave up that right 11 years ago." My fingers brushed the attorney's letter in my pocket. The paper felt warm, almost alive against my skin. Mr. Crane specifically requested my presence. Of course he did. Travis took a step forward, his polished shoes squeaking against the porch boards. "But this is still private property." A car door slammed behind us. More relatives arriving to witness the spectacle of the prodigal daughter's return. Someone whispered, "Shameless." Another voice murmured, "Gold digger." The words floated on the April breeze like dandelion seeds. "You shouldn't have brought the mistake," Brooke said, her eyes fixed on Micah. The old rage flared hot and familiar in my chest. But Micah's hand steadied me, his grip reminding me why we'd come. I pulled the letter from my pocket, unfolding it with deliberate care. "Actually, I have been legally summoned." The words emerged calm and clear by Walter James Moore's personal attorney. Travis moved closer, using his height to loom over us. The same trick he'd pulled when we were children, fighting over the television remote. "Listen here, little sister, let them in." Aunt Margaret's voice cut through the tension. She appeared from behind the wall of relatives, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. This house was Elizabeth's, too. "Or have you forgotten your mother so quickly?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Brooke's perfectly lined lips pressed into a bloodless smile. "Fine, but don't expect." "I don't expect anything." I guided Micah up the steps, keeping myself between him and Travis. "Just the courtesy of following our father's final wishes." The foyer smelled of lemon polish and lilies. The grandfather clock still marked each second with the same hollow tick that had counted down my departure years ago. Family portraits lined the walls, Scully-edited versions that showed no trace of a middle daughter. Attorney Crane waited in the study, his briefcase open on Father's mahogany desk. The confidence in broken Travis's expressions as they settled into the leather armchairs made my stomach clench. They'd had 11 years to ensure their inheritance. 11 years to whisper in Father's ear about his ungrateful daughter. Now then, Crane's voice carried the weight of authority earned through decades of family law. "Before we proceed with the reading, there's something Walter wanted you all to see." He lifted a small video player from his briefcase. Brooke's smile faltered. Travis sat forward, his fingers drumming against the chair arm. The screen flickered to life. Father's face filled the frame older than I remembered. Deep lines carved valleys around his mouth. His hair had gone completely white. "If you're watching this," he began, his voice raspier than the one in my memories. "I finally run out of chances to say these things in person." He cleared his throat. "Lindsay, if you're here, it means you're braver than I ever was." The air left my lungs. Micah pressed closer to my side. "You left because you had to live." Father's eyes seemed to look straight through the screen. "And I didn't open the door when you needed me most. But you kept sending money through Norman. You stayed my daughter even when I stopped being your father." Brick made a small strangled sound. I kept Micah's drawing above my desk. The camera panned to show a framed crayon picture, bright flowers and stick figures beneath a yellow sun. I looked at it every day. "My grandson has your mother's gift for finding beauty and simple things." My vision blurred. I blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. "Which brings me to the matter of inheritance." Father's face returned to the screen. "To my daughter Lindsay. I leave the Richmond family home valued at $430,000, and my savings account containing $145,000. What Travis surged to his feet, knocking his chair backward. Additionally, I've established a college fund for my grandson Micah in the amount of $90,000. Brooke's face contorted. This can't be legal. To my other children, Brooke and Travis' father continued, his voice steady. I leave $15,000 each along with their choice of personal mementos from my study. He wasn't in his right mind. Travis's fist slammed against the desk. We took care of him. We were here. Attorney Crane reached into his briefcase again. I have here a complete psychological evaluation performed 3 months ago, certifying Walter's mental competence. But the money she sent. Burke's voice shook. It was guilt money, trying to buy her way back in. Mr. Norman stepped forward from his corner. A manila envelope appeared in his hands. I have 11 years of payment receipts. Every month, like clockwork, your sister made sure your father's utilities were covered. She never missed a payment. Even when times were tight, the room spun slightly. I steadied myself against the bookshelf, my fingers brushing the familiar spines. A flash of color caught my eye. There above Father's desk hung Micah's drawing. Carefully matted, professionally framed, positioned where someone seated at the desk would see it with every glance up. My fingers traced the glass over Micah's childish signature. The first tear fell, leaving a dark spot on my sleeve. Mom. Micah's voice came soft beside me. Are you okay? The question echoed across 11 years of silence, across rain-soaked nights and carefully addressed envelopes with no return address, across all the words Father and I had never found the courage to say. Yes, baby. I touched the frame one more time, feeling the shape of forgiveness beneath my fingers. I think I finally am. 3 days later, after I returned home and my siblings' constant pestering from the porch of my childhood home, I watched Brooke and Travis huddled with their attorney on the front steps. Their voices carry across the yard in angry whispers, punctuated by sharp gestures toward the house. Me house now. The morning sun catches Travis's wedding ring as he stabs his finger at a document. Your father wasn't in his right mind. The attorney's tone floats above the chorus of psychas. We can prove it. A familiar tightness grips my chest. 11 years ago, I stood on these same steps, my arms aching from holding newborn Micah. Now my son sleeps upstairs, in what used to be my childhood bedroom, his sketchbook open on the nightstand. The screen door kicks behind me. Mr. Norman steps out, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. You should know what they're saying in town. Tell me Travis called the Richmond Herald this morning, claimed you abandoned your father during his illness, called you a gold digger coming back for the inheritance. I press my palm against the porch railing, feeling the warm wood beneath my fingers. The same railing where Mom used to hang Christmas lights, where she taught me to deadhead her prized roses. That's not the worst of it, Mr. Norman continues. Brooke's been changing the locks while you visit the cemetery, and the whispers at church. He shakes his head. What whispers that you never cared about Walter? That you only sent money to ease your conscience? A cardinal lands on Mom's old bird feeder, brilliant rat against the weathered wood. I've spent 11 years carrying the weight of that night in the rain, the sound of my father's door closing. 11 years of quiet support through Mr. Norman, hoping someday Walter would understand why I had to leave. We need to talk to Dad's doctor, I say about his state of mind. Mr. Norman nods. Already made the appointment, and I've got every receipt from your monthly payments. 11 years of utility bills. Never missed one. The attorney's voice rises again. We'll file first thing Monday. I turn from the porch, heading inside to the study where Walter's presence still lingers. The leather chair where he read his evening paper. The desk calendar was marked with his careful handwriting. And there, above the desk, Micah's crayon drawing in its simple frame. Opening the bottom drawer, I find Walter's journal, its pages filled with his strong, slanting script. I saw Lindsay today at the hospital. She thought I was sleeping. My girl looked tired, but her shoulders were straight just like her mother's. The entry stops there, a water stain blurring the final words. A knock at the front door pulls me from the journal. Aunt Margaret stands on the threshold clutching her pocketbook. She came to help in this endless fight. Those vipers are still out there plotting, she says, stepping inside. But I've got something they don't know about. She settles into Mom's old armchair, smoothing her skirt. Your father talked about you, Lindsay, every Sunday after church over coffee and pecan pie. He kept a photo of you in his wallet from your college graduation. Said you were the only one who inherited your mother's strength. My throat tightens. He never told me. Men of his generation. She shakes her head. They think silence is the same as strength. But he was proud of you, especially after Mrs. Pearson told him about your work at the library. Mrs. Pearson! Why do you think he requested Amazing Grace for his funeral? It was your mother's favorite hymn, the one she sang while you helped her in the garden. Outside, car doors slam, voices rise. I move to the window in time to see Travis stumbling toward his Mercedes. Tie loosened, face flushed. He's shouting in a man with a notebook or reporter from the looks of him. She bewitched him somehow. Travis's words carry across the lawn. Our father would never. Brooke rushes after him, her carefully applied makeup cracking as she screams at the reporter to leave. Their attorney stands apart, briefcase clutched to his chest, watching his clients unravel in the morning sun. The truth has a way of rising, Aunt Margaret says softly, like cream in coffee. I return to Walter's desk, running my fingers along its smooth surface. Something catches beneath the bottom edge, an envelope taped underneath. My name written in Walter's shaky hand. What will you do with it? Aunt Margaret asks. The envelope feels heavy in my hands, weighted with words my father couldn't speak in life. Through the window, I watch my siblings retreat to their cars, leaving their attorney alone on the sidewalk. He stares up at the house for a long moment, before pulling out his phone. Some truths I tell her need to be said even if they're late. A floorboard cacks overhead. Micah's stirring from his nap. Soon he'll come downstairs asking about lunch, maybe wanting to show me a new drawing. My son, who has never known the taste of rejection, who fills blank pages with gardens he's never seen. I slip the envelope into my pocket, saving it for when I'm ready. Some wounds need time to heal before you can look at them in full daylight. But for now, the weight of it against my hip feels like a beginning. Aunt Margaret rises, touching my shoulder as she passes. Your mother would be proud of how you've handled this. Both of them would be. The morning sun streams through the study windows, warming the leather of Walter's chair. Outside, the cardinal still perches on Mom's feeder, singing its bright song into the Virginia air. I think of all the mornings she spent filling that feeder, telling me how birds remember kindness, how they always return home. The next day, Brooke and Travis arrived at sunset, carrying between them a weathered cardboard box filled with photo albums. The leather bindings cracked when they opened them on the kitchen table, releasing the musty scent of forgotten memories. Look, Brooke said, her voice wavering. She pointed to a Polaroid of 3 children on a tire swing. Remember this? The old oak tree behind the Methodist church? I kept my hands in my lap, watching her manicured fingernail trace the edge of the photo. The memory surfaced unbidden, Travis pushing too hard, the rope snapping, mother rushing over with band-aids and kisses. Dad would have wanted us to be family again. Brooke's eyes glistened. She'd practiced this performance, I realized. The slight catch in her voice, the precise moment to dab at her tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. Travis leaned forward, his suit jacket stretching across broad shoulders. We've been thinking. He glanced at Brooke, then back to me. What Dad really meant was for us to share everything equally. The house, the account split 3 ways, like when we were kids. The silence stretched between us like taffy sweet and artificial. Through the window, I watched Micah sketching in his notebook under the maple tree, where my mother used to hang laundry. I found something I said, reaching into my cardigan pocket. The envelope was soft from hours of handling. Walter's handwriting, a spidery scrawl across the front. Brooke's spine stiffened. What is that? I broke the seal and unfolded the pages, the paper whispering against my fingers. The words blurred, then sharpened. I watched you from afar through Norman's eyes. I read aloud. The kitchen clock ticked, marking each revelation. Every month when your money arrived, I couldn't bear my own cowardice. Travis's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. The day I learned you came during my stroke, I cried myself to sleep. The last words trembled in the air between us. A car door slammed outside. Thunder rumbled in the distance. If your mom hadn't left, maybe he wouldn't have died alone. Brooke's words cracked across the kitchen like lightning. Micah appeared in the doorway, his sketchbook clutched against his chest. His eyes darted between us before he bolted screen door banging behind him. Rain started falling as I ran after him, fat drops marking the path to the old metal awning where I used to hide with my books. Micah huddled underneath his shoulders, shaking. I crawled beside him, water soaking through my jeans. The awning thrummed with rain, the same hollow music it had made 25 years ago. Your grandfather made mistakes. I pulled him close, breathing in the pencil shavings and apple shampoo scent of him. But I still loved him. I've never once regretted walking away with you. The storm passed quickly, leaving puddles that reflected the breaking clouds. When we returned to the kitchen, Aunt Margaret stood at the stove, stirring hot chocolate. The familiar scent of Hershey's cocoa and vanilla wrapped around us like a blanket. Mr. Norman appeared with Walter's old Afghan, the one Mother had crocheted during her last winter. He draped it over Micah's shoulders with the gentle hands that had passed my monthly payments to Walter for 11 years. The doorbell chimed. Mrs. Pearson bustled in with a covered casserole dish, steam escaping when she lifted the lid. Just like I used to make for your mother, she said, her voice warm with remembrance. How she loved my chicken and dumplings. Travis slumped at the table, the fight draining from him like water. He always liked you best. His words dissolved into bitter tears even after everything. We thought he'd change the will if we kept you away. Brooke's admission fell into the quiet kitchen. Her mascara left black tracks down her cheeks. I stirred my hot chocolate, watching the marshmallows melt into white swirls. The old kitchen walls held the echo of so many words spoken and unspoken. Harsh and tender, lost and found. I never wanted his money. Steam rose from my cup like incense. I just wanted him to see me. Outside, a cardinal landed on the windowsill, a bright splash of red against the rain-washed glass. Mother used to say they were messengers from heaven. I watched it hop once, twice, then take flight into the clearing sky. Micah's pencil scratched against paper, capturing the moment in gentle graphite strokes. The Afghan slipped from one shoulder, and Mr. Norman quietly adjusted it. Mrs. Pearson hummed as she served up bowls of dumplings, the tune, something old and sweet from childhood summers. Aunt Margaret touched my hand, her fingers liver-spotted and warm. In the corner, Brooke and Travis sat apart. Their careful facades crumbled to dust, leaving only the scared children they'd always been. The cardinal's echo of red lingered in my vision, like an after-image of hope. Sometimes I thought forgiveness isn't a single moment, but 1,000 small mercies, a bowl of chicken and dumplings, a borrowed blanket, the shelter of an old awning in the rain. Would you like more hot chocolate? Aunt Margaret asked Micah. He nodded, and she poured with the same steady hands that had taught me to hold a teacup when I was small. The marshmallows bobbed and spun white stars in a chocolate sky. The next couple of days would bring more storms, more words, more wounds to heal. But tonight in this kitchen, full of broken people trying their best to be whole, I felt the first fragile threads of peace begin to weave themselves together. Outside, the last rays of sunset painted the puddles gold. 3 days later, the key turned in the lock with a solid thunk. Behind me, Micah bounced on his toes, clutching his art supplies to his chest. We stood in the foyer of what was now our home. The thought still caught in my throat like a fishing hook. Can I set up in the sunroom? His voice echoed against the bare walls. The light looks perfect for painting. I nodded, watching him dart down the hallway. His footsteps stirred dust motes that danced in shafts of morning sun. The house had been closed up since the funeral, but beneath the mustustiness, I caught hints of furniture polish and Walter's pipe tobacco. The windows protested as I pushed them open one by one. Fresh spring air rushed in, carrying the scent of awakening earth from Mother's garden. I paused at the kitchen window, remembering how she'd stand here, washing dishes, humming hymns, while watching cardinals at the feeder. In the shed, her gardening gloves still hung on their hook-faded green canvas. The fingers curled as if waiting for her hands. I slipped them on. They fit perfectly. The flower beds had gone wild in the year since her death. Weeds tangled with heritage roses choking out the delicate blooms she tended so carefully. But underneath winter's debris, green shoots pushed toward the sun. The bulbs she'd planted decades ago still remembered their purpose. Mom, Micah's voice floated from the sunroom. Come look. He had set up his easel in the corner where my mother's once stood. His pencils lined the windowsill in rainbow order just as she'd arranged her pastels. I hadn't told him about that habit of hers. I'm drawing the bird out there. He pointed to a sparrow hopping between puddles. Do you think Grandma Elizabeth would have liked my art? She would have loved it. My voice caught. She always said art was how we capture light. That afternoon, I tackled my old bedroom. The walls still were the pale yellow I'd chosen at 16. My fingers traced the pencil marks behind the door where I'd tracked my height until college. The lowest mark bore my mother's handwriting. Lindsay, age 5. The mattress complained as I sank onto it. Springs, singing an old familiar song. Outside my window, the massive oak tree filtered sunlight through new leaves. How many nights had I lain here watching those shadows dance across my ceiling? Mr. Norman arrived at dusk, carrying a cardboard box tied with twine. Found these in Walter's study, he said, setting it on the kitchen counter. Think you should have them. Inside, I found newspaper clippings, my promotion at the library, a write-up about our summer reading program, birthday cards Walter had written, but never sent their envelopes sealed and stamped. At the bottom, a letter in his shaky hand. From that day on, I stopped calling you a disgrace and started calling you my daughter again. Every month when your money came, I knew I'd failed you, not the other way around. The doorbell rang before I could read more. Aunt Margaret stood on the porch with a casserole dish. Behind her, Mrs. Pearson waved from her car. Hope you don't mind, Aunt Margaret said. But it's Sunday family dinner tradition. Micah set the table with the old china, while I heated Margaret's chicken and dumplings. The kitchen filled with the sounds I remembered from childhood. Forks clinking, ice cubes settling in glasses, comfortable conversation flowing like honey. Show them your new drawing, honey? I called to Micah. He proudly displayed his sketch, a sparrow sheltering under a rose leaf during a summer shower. Mrs. Pearson clasped her hands. Mr. Norman nodded approvingly. You've got your grandmother's eye, Aunt Margaret said. She could always find beauty in simple moments. Later, after our guests left, I stood in the garden as evening settled over Richmond. Mother's roses had survived scattered but stubborn. With time and care, they'd thrive again. Through the windows behind me, lamplight spilled onto the lawn. The house felt different now. Warm, welcoming, alive with possibility. Mom, Micah called from the back door. Can you help me with this math problem? I smiled, breathing in the night air. The garden would wait. Right now, my son needed me. And for the first time since returning to Richmond, that simple truth felt like enough. Walking toward the house, I whispered words I'd held inside for 11 years. He finally saw me. The porch light clicked on automatically. Walter's doing his final gift of illumination. In its glow, Micah bent over his homework at the kitchen table right where I used to sit. The sight filled my chest with an ache so sweet, it could barely be called pain. We were home. Not the home of my childhood, but something new, something ours.